Anil's Ghost and Overview. Anil Tissera is the protagonist of the novel Anil's Ghost. Anil was a Sri Lankan by birth, but she left Sri Lanka in order to pursue her higher education. Now she comes back to Sri Lanka in the midst of the civil war as a representative of the United Nations in order to investigate the murder of innocent people. Sharath Dayasena is a representative of the native government. He is also an archaeologist who joins Anil in her investigation. They use an abandoned ship as their base for work, and during one of their expeditions in Bandarawala caves, which in actuality is an government protected area, they find 4 skeletons. And among one, Anil discovers later that the skeleton belongs to the current age and it was not an older one. They name the skeleton as Sailor, and now it is their quest to identify the sailor. Anil and Sharath goes and visit Palipana and asks for his help in creating the face of the sailor. Palipana is the teacher and guide and mentor of Sharath, and he is now living as a hermit in the woods. Palipana advises Sharath to find a man named Ananda. Later, we find that Sharath manages to identify Ananda and brings him to the place where they keep the skeleton. Ananda is a very skilled man and he manages to recreate the face of the sailor. But the trauma in Ananda's life is so big that the very next day he tries to kill himself by cutting his own throat. Sailor's true identity is revealed and he is Ruvan Kumara, who by profession is a toddy tapper. After this, Sharath leaves for Colombo. He insists that Anil should stay wherever she is and should not contact anybody in Colombo. When Sharath takes more time to come back, Anil contacts Dr. Pereira. Anil falls into the clutches of the government. All her evidences were taken away from her. Sharath could do nothing to help her. But on the day of the investigation, Sharath manages to shoo away Anil by giving her another set of skeleton, and he asks her to do investigation with that skeleton and report should be given to the government in 48 hours. Anil was really angry, but she could do nothing, and when she encounters Sharath later, he slaps her and asks her to leave at once. Later in the lab, Anil finds that the skeleton handed over is none other than the sailor. She also finds a tape recorder within the skeleton. There, Sharath has left her with a message asking her to delete whatever is being recorded. He implores her to leave the country at once, soon after the investigation. Anil leaves the very next day as instructed by Sharath. And later we find in the story that Sharath was killed by the government and his body was sent to the hospital to be Anil leaves as instructed by Sharath. Later in the story we find Sharath being murdered. His body is sent to a hospital where Gamini, his brother, works as a doctor. He identifies his brother's body. And later we find that there is a bombing in the city and president of the country was also killed in the bombing. Ananda, who has regained his health, is seen conducting the Netramangala ceremony in a Buddhist temple. Apart from the main plot, there are certain other stories associated with the main one. We can find the life of Ananda, also Sarat's relationship with his wife as well as his brother, and also Gamini, his life as a doctor and how his marriage has failed him. And again we find the interesting story of Palipana, the learned scholar. The story has an abrupt ending. In a way, Anil escapes murder and trial, but Sharat and his ghost will hold on to her until her end. So according to the title, Sharat is actually the ghost associated with Anil.